January the 15th of 2022. And again, today we have a special presenter here too, Mr. Ron Slobodnik, who will be giving us a presentation on, Ron, if you could stand up and
sure, of course. Okay. I decided to do it here because when I stood at that end of the room, I could understand that it was kind of blinding if you were looking that way at what I have to present to you. Just the thought before we begin with my presentation, Lester, I know, is interested in watches, and Lester, did you happen to see in this? I found this very interesting. This is a watch auction for like an ANA in watches and clocks. And in this auction, what did they have? They offered an 1856 proof Flying Eagle in the watch auction. I found that very interesting. And I've also noticed something else interesting, and perhaps some of you have noticed it too, that in coin world, stamp companies are starting to switch to coins because stamps are not doing what coins are doing. So we have that. Anyway, that was just a sidelight.
What was it, the company?
It's this one?
Yeah, the auction house.
Jones and Horan.
Horan.
Auctioneer. And this is an upcoming auction. And they've got, I couldn't believe it. Here we have an 1856 Flying Eagle cent, 19,500. Anyway. This presentation I'm going to make to you today, I hope it'll be interesting for you. It's been in my head for really a long time. And dealing, of course, people bring up items to sell, certainly coins and currency. But from time to time, a person will bring up a box, and there's more than just coins and currency. There can be watches, and there can be pocket knives, and these sorts of things. Well, over time, some interesting things popped up, like this little gem. Now, this, to anybody else, would be useless, nothing. But I accumulated these things, and I started thinking about it. This was collected in the 1930s, and what is it? A cigar band collection. And so thinking about, and these boxes coming along with things, I sat at my desk one day and I thought, I was a child of the Depression. You have a member here, John, who's in Florida, born before that Depression. I was kind of hoping he would be here because he could add something to this. Now, I've interviewed people older than me. I'm 84. And I've interviewed people older. In fact, my neighbor living across the road, I interviewed him for this, and he gave me a wonderful idea. And the title of my presentation, as Lester and maybe you know, is Cheap or Free? Collecting During the Great Depression. Because the Great Depression, you've heard about it, all of you, I'm sure, and some of you, your families lived through it. The Great Depression began with the economic collapse on Wall Street in 1929, and finally by 1936, those are the dates, it finally eased off. I was born in 1937. I'll be 85 this year. But we lived still like we were in the Depression. I remember that. My father repaired my shoes. My first haircut at a barber was when my father died. I was 23 years old. My father cut my hair until that, I didn't know what to ask for when I went to a barber shop. I didn't know what to say to the guy, I need a haircut. So we lived that way. And the thought came in my mind, what did people collect? They certainly collected. What did they collect when they had little or no money? Cheap or free? So, okay. This is an interesting book. I just happened to have had it in my library. We had Everything But Money, a book on the Depression. And of course, I highlighted a few of the interesting pages. The bank holiday here, when people found out when they went to the bank, I'll pass this around by the way, there was no money to be had. Your savings were gone. And of course, then the bread lines. There's a picture here of a huge line, people waiting for bread. And interestingly enough, one of the collectibles, which is really a great collectible today, there's even a club organized around it. In fact, on my next coin show, I've got a few in my inventory. Hobo Nichols. Hobo Nichols, hobos. And of course, the two calamities that happened during the Great Depression, which made it worse. And those two calamities were the bank failure in 1931. Again, no one could get their money. And the Dust Bowls of 1934 and 36, when in the Midwest, terrific drought, it just horrendous. Now, but getting to it, here, pass that around. Maybe you'd like to see that. Now, as I thought about this, I thought not only were collectors up against it, but what about dealers? And of course, in our area, I don't know if any of you remember, he's passed away for a while. I think Lester remembers. John might remember. Others of you. His name was Earl Schill. Did that ring a bell with anybody? Okay, well, Earl Schill died in 1991. I have on tape, I gave the eulogy at his funeral. Because when I was a boy, I would go to Earl's shop with only a couple of dollars. And I remember the best 3 words advice Earl ever gave to me. Because I was collecting, cheap or free. I had a little stamp collection because we were an immigrant family. People from Europe were sending from Poland and so on. And standing there looking at, Earl did, coins and stamps. And standing there looking at his display of stamps, he walked up to me and said, 3 words of the best advice. Stay with coins.
Wow.
I took my couple of dollars and walked away from the stamps, and I'm looking at the coins now. And I never went back to the stamps. Okay, now, but what did Earl do? What did Earl do? Earl was in business for 60 years. Opened it in 1927, was booming in 1927, and was in business until 1987. So what did Earl do? Well, Earl wasn't making a lot of money selling coins. So what did he do? And this is interesting now. He took a position, night manager, Fort Shelby Hotel. Now Earl was a collector, not only a collector too. And what did he collect? Working at night at the Fort Shelby Hotel, Earl was collecting autographs because they were free. People still collect them today and pay a great deal of money for them. Now, what did Earl collect his autographs on? Earl was also a baseball fan. So Earl collected his autographs on this baseball. Dated 1931, Fort Shelby Hotel, with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig.
Wow.
On this ball.
Wow.
Lou Gehrig was impossible. Earl would tell me, let's pass this around. Earl Schill. Earl would tell me that when the players came in at night after a game, that was his chance to get signatures. And he'd pull the ball out from under because they came to get their keys and their mail, that sort of thing.
Right.
And he would pull the ball out, and no problem. Babe Ruth, very clear. Goose Gossage, and so forth. Okay, fine. But when Gehrig came in and he tried the same thing, Gehrig said, no, I don't do autographs. He tried that a couple of times. And Gehrig, when the Yankees came in, he said, I don't do, no. Well, one evening, Lou and Ruth came in. And Lou and Ruth were pretty tight buddies. So he pulled the baseball out and tried one more time. And when Gehrig said no, Ruth said, oh, come on, sign the guy's ball.
Why he was not signing?
You can look at it later, but I don't want to pass this around.
Ron, why he was not signing?
He had a thing about that. He signed, if you guys are baseball fans, Lou Gehrig signed very little to nothing. This was his thing. He wouldn't autograph. And by the way, he did, you probably know, that to popularize baseball, Gehrig and Ruth formed their own teams, and in the off-season traveled out west. Larrap and Lou and something Babes, I've got a photograph of the two of them. They organized their own teams to travel in the western part of the country to popularize baseball during the 1930s. The ball, again, is dated 1931. Okay, now, beyond Earl Schill and collecting autographs on the baseball, what I've done here basically is sort of alphabetize the different collectibles. Now, I'm sure there are more, but here it goes. Apart from autographs, arrowheads. They were free. They were free. Now, what would you do? Probably, if you know your Michigan history, the tribes in the north migrated to the south in the winter, and there were traditional campsites in southern Michigan and in northern Ohio and in northern Indiana. In the spring, when the farmers plowed the fields and the rains came, that's when the boys would go out looking for arrowheads, spear points. I didn't bring my axe heads. I have a couple of those, but this is
But did you look for them?
a
or
collection.
You just bought from somebody?
I'm sorry?
It's your finding?
Well, something walks up to your table, you don't turn it away. And I have probably, not just from one person, I probably have about 1,000 arrowheads. But they're free. You didn't have to pay anything. You just walked out in the field and collected arrowheads.
You're beautiful.
And spear. One fellow brought up to my table a couple of years ago. They were at the Blue Water Bridge. He and his son. They were fishing, but they were looking around, and there was a bunch. There was a bunch of gravel and stones. He picked up an axe point. I gave him $60 for it.
Wow.
Okay. Anyway. Okay. Now, what about? I'm doing free here first. Arrowheads. And how about this one? Another thing that walked up to my table. I looked at it. I don't think a dealer would look at this and say, beat it. Bottle cap collection, 1930s. Now, these are my boxes. Those came in like a cigar box. These came in probably a cigar box. And I have now, this is only part of the bottle cap collection. Those are free. And people collected them.
Have you got Moxie Cola in there?
Well, yes.
You do?
Well, you pass it around. Take a
I'll see it
look.
eventually.
Take a look.
Thank you.
Yeah, all kinds of interesting bottle caps. You know, someone waited for their the beer to be emptied or whatever and threw the cap away. Now, I did have, but it was really ratty and it kind of fell apart on me. I picked up an insect collection that came in a cigar box, but it was part of a bunch of stuff that somebody brought up. The best thing I could offer on that, it's not an insect, but be nice to this. It's a little brown bat, mounted, but it's not an insect. But people collected stuff like that. All right, and this is the one that really got me thinking about the cheaper free and collecting during the Depression. It's this little book where I put this in. Probably a kid, no doubt a child, collecting cigar bands and gluing them into the book. Now, I would say 99 people out of 100 would take something like this and simply throw it away. They throw it away. You know, anybody walking up to a coin dealer at a coin show say, "What do you give me for this?" They'd say, but not me.
Not me.
Treat it carefully. It's not fragile, but it's old. Cigar band collection, free. Now, and of course, I'll go to this one here. I don't think I have to circulate it. I just bring it to your attention. Foreign coins. Foreign coins were free. How do I know they were free? Because as a boy, starting out collecting, what did I start collecting? I didn't have any money to buy coins. And I started on my own initiative. I was about 19 years old. They were just interesting. But what was available to me? A few foreign coins in my family. And my mother started asking around in the neighborhood. And pretty soon I had a cigar box full. free. Foreign coins. That is also true of stamps. Stamps were free. There were Poles in our neighborhood, Ukrainians, German immigrant families, and they saved the envelopes for me. So pretty soon I was wetting them down to get the stamps off and putting them in my little holder. So you could get foreign coins during the 1930s and stamps. In fact, this box is full of stamps, collected just that way, ripped off of envelopes, and people collected it. All right? Cheap, actually free. Now let me close this and go back to my cheat sheet here. All right, something else coming along that's free. Yes. These were free. And I've got an interesting tale to tell you about these. I think you'll find it very interesting. And what is this? These are matchbook covers. Now, I don't know if you realize this, but in the matchbook collecting area, matchbooks are collected and displayed in 3 different ways. This is one of the 3 ways. The other way, of course, is to open the matchbook up completely and display it that way. A third way is to open it up and take the matches out. Now, this summer, when I was with Lester and Michael at A&A, a major national dealer advertising, I won't say who it is, I won't give a tip-off, I know him really well, personally. My wife knows who I'm talking about. I bought a very rare collectible from him, very rare. And that's maybe a story for another presentation to the club. Very rare. But he also said to me, Ron, the Pillsbury family, they sold out to another company, but the Pillsbury family, multimillionaires. I was invited to come in and appraise and buy their coin collection. But they had something else that really set me back. What was that? In leather binders, the Pillsbury family collected what? Matchbooks. He said one dealer offered him $800. I said, that's probably too cheap. So I'm still kind of negotiating with matchbooks from the Pillsbury family. So these were, again, I'll pass it around, but they hold it up because they tend to want to slip out. Nothing super, but these are the kinds of things and this was free, because you even know, many of you could go to a bar, a hotel, a gas station, and they were happy to give you a matchbook to advertise. And by the way, in the area of matchbooks, what are the best ones to collect? Little tip for you if you run across them. The very best would be ones from a military camp somewhere, in the PX, out of the military. The next best ones would be train matchbooks. And from then it goes all over the road to auto dealerships and things like that. But those are the kinds of things people collect and still do collect, but not like they once did. Those were free. Now, something else that was free, and now some of them really have some value, and that would be postcards. Obviously, postcards were the cheapest way to communicate. The card cost 1 cent, maybe 2, and it only cost a penny to send it somewhere. So now postcards today, forget it. We're going to text, we're going to email, forget the postcard. But postcard collecting, of course, was free, and it was thriving in the 1930s. Now, I brought a sample in. These are just to look at. This is a small collection. I mean, I got thousands of cards. This is a Great Lakes shipping. But this one I think the club will be interested in. And what is this? Oh, there's 2 here.
This one. You're talking about this one.
This one, yes. This should go like this. It says here, postcards published by the Polish Military Commission, 1918. It also shows Pilsudski in one of these cards, and it shows a priest blessing the group and so forth. Postcards. Very scarce to come by because they're not used. Those are the Polish cards.
Are there certain postcards that seem more valuable than others?
Oh, yes, there are. I should have brought in one Okay, what is good in a postcard if you stumble across one? The best postcards for us to collect here, the most expensive, are small towns. Real photo, not lithos, not colored lithos, real photographs of small town Michigan, right down Main Street. The smaller the town, the bigger the price, because the fewer the cards, like coins. And as far as other cards are concerned, trains, cards that were given out if you travel on a train, automotive, same thing, dealership. And for us as numismatists, probably one of the most expensive cards would be, only a few existing, look it up, the Ye Old Mint, our first mint. Before it was torn down, people tried to save it, but it was torn down. But a guy took a picture of it, put it on a postcard. Today, the postcard is, postcards another whole story unto themselves. Okay, well that kind of covers most of what I had for the for the free. Let's give the cheap a shot. All right, what could you, if you had a penny or two in your pocket, what could you come up with? Because that's really what it amounted to. A penny or two in your pocket. Well, you could come up with something like this. And of course, this is really very humble, because the best card, I'm not into cards, but baseball card. This was a penny when I was a kid. Now, at my age, why didn't I save the cards? Pardon me, I was more interested in the bubble gum. I gave the card to somebody else. I could have cared less. The only card that I have now is that because I have a collection of autographed Mark Fidrich items. I've collected Mark Fidrich. And Mark, if you probably know, Mark had a Polish mother. He was half Polish and had a tragic death. But I liked Fidrich. He was a colorful ball player, and I have a glove and other things I've collected from him, and I have a card from him. That's the only thing I have in cards. I'm sorry to say I'm not that much into the cards. But of course, for a penny, you could buy and kids collected them. They traded them and collected them. Cheap, but interesting. Coins. What kind of coins could you have cheap? Well, you have to remember, in the 1930s, there were two low denomination coins, which were not minted anymore, but still fairly widely circulated. Indian cents and Liberty nickels. And my uncle was he was a fireman. He was lucky enough to have a job. My dad didn't. But anyway, he collected and eventually amassed Indian pennies, obviously knew what the rare ones were, and had a little mail order business during the Depression, selling rarer Indian head pennies. And so you all know what Indian head cents look like. I mean, I have a couple here, but you know what they're all about. And of course, Liberty nickels too. Of course, that was 5 cents. It was a little bit, you could get 5 pennies for maybe, I won't collect Liberty head nickels, I'll collect Indian head pennies. I can get 5 of those in place of 1 nickel. And something else here too, I'm sure you all know what a good for is, a token. And good fors were common during this era. A good for a beer, good for a cigar, 5 cents to a cigar, something like that. And therefore, good for tokens, which are collected today, that was an item that was set aside and kept then. I have one here, you've seen good fors. Okay, but they were cheap. They usually, sometimes got them for nothing, and maybe made a purchase, and then they gave you one because you made a purchase. All of you know about Cracker Jacks, right? Of course. Cracker Jack began about 1890 and eventually began to put prizes to encourage purchasing. And you say, well, what happened? Well, right through the Depression. So if you were lucky enough for Christmas to get a box of Cracker Jacks, that way Christmas was kind of sad. I remember wanting an electric train, and I wanted it. Finally, here came the box, the train. When I opened up the box, my heart sank. Why? Because the tracks only had 2 rails. It wasn't electric, you know. Anyway, how about the Cracker Jacks? Well, where did that come in? None of you will know this, but it was a common practice to wear a cap made out of felt called a beanie. A beanie. You wore it in the summer. You want a baseball cap, a beanie. And on the beanie, what would you put on the beanie? Your Cracker Jack collectibles. And maybe if you got a duplicate, you swapped one. All right, I brought something like that in. Cracker Jack collectible. And of course, it was cheap. And sometimes, obviously, if you get it as a gift, then it was free. That is a black powder handgun. But that's the kind of prize you got. You remember that, right? Wrapped in a little plastic. Okay. Along the same lines, this is really a gooder. I won't hesitate to circulate it. Called radio premiums. Radio was big time in the 30s. Radio took people away from their own daily drudge. They listened to the radio. And stories came along. Tom Mix, The Shadow, The Lone Ranger, The Green Hornet. All these emerged during the 30s. And of course, it was one of these things, right? In the evening, staring in front of the radio. The bugger was as big as that mantle, and you stared there looking at the speaker, and you could hear the thundering hoofbeats of the great horse, Silver. All right? Well, radio premiums were collected because during the program, they would say, okay, now have your mom go down to the store and get a box of Pep. That wonderful cereal that make you play baseball better and all that. And if your mom gets you a box of Pep cereal, if you send that box top in with a dime, you will get, wow, please, Mom, get me that Pep cereal, please. What I have here, though, is really a very nice, I have some of these, a very choice collectible. And what it is, it's a 1930s Lone Ranger coin. Lone Ranger, which originated here in Detroit, you might know that, was a super popular 3 times a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7:30, we're going to ride the range. And boy, how could you resist not sending a dime and getting a real Lone Ranger coin? If you hold it up, it's fine. Pass it around. It's kind of hold up so something can slip out. And there's that good for token in there as well. Now, okay. Well, I did mention stamps. You could buy U.S. stamps if you had a few pennies. By the way, stamp collecting did boom. The big boom for stamp collecting was the 1930s because they were cheap. And coins were, but stamps were cheap. And that went on, that boom went on through World War II, but by the 1950s, I can assure you, stamps were already turning this way when Earl Schill said to me, when I was a schoolboy in the early 50s, 52, when he looked over and said, stay with coins. Stamps were already moving the other way. All right, now, marbles. Marbles? Marbles. I know. I had a bag of marbles. In fact, I did, well, these are, but what I was going to show you was this. Marbles came, maybe, I don't know if you know your marbles, or maybe you've lost them along the way, but anyway, marbles came in, there were cat eyes, rainbows, moonies, marine crystals, and big shooters. And you swapped with kids, you know, for whatever. And then in the 1930s, there were cartoon characters. I'll send it around. This is a marble bag. It came original marble. And by the way, here's that item I mentioned called a beanie.
Yeah.
A beanie that kids wore. Now this guy doesn't have any, well, he's got something on, but not the little things we put on our beanie. There he is, kneeling there in his knickers, shooting marbles in the 30s. I remember I was the last communion class at our church, and I had to wear knickers. The last one wearing knickers. Okay, And there were, of course, here's a little, just a sample of the marbles. Marble collecting, by the way, a fellow this morning, I did stop at a coin shop before I came here and dealing with this guy, and he has a marble collection he wants to sell. I told him that I do know marbles somewhat, but marbles are bulky and heavy, and we do have quite a few at home, but this just, the big ones are the big shooters, and there's cat eyes and so on. But these are the most interesting marbles here. These are the marbles out of the 1930s. Now, if you look on the marbles, there are printed on in black ink cartoon and movie characters of the era. And they became, now these are kind of special, kind of pricey. They became, and by the way, Civil War marbles are the best. At a coin show, a man brought in 42 Civil War marbles in a jar, about all. They're clay marbles. But nonetheless, if you look, you'll see on these, there's Moon Mullins, a detective, and other, if you will, characters here that are on these marbles. The kids, of course, came up with those. They got swapped and collected as well. There was something else that I slipped before the marbles, unfortunately, and it's on that sheet going around. It would be celluloid buttons. Celluloid buttons. How did you come up with those? They would be, well, you made a purchase, so they were, I had to buy something. And the celluloid button I had is Buster Brown Shoes and Hose. Buster Brown was big time, 20s, 30s, 40s. And when you went in to buy a pair of Buster Brown shoes, after you made your purchase, your mom or dad made your purchase, the guy walked up and he put a Buster Brown pin on your shirt. All right? And I just sold, and I know if any of you ever sold something and say, why did I do that? I had a collection of 200 celluloid pins. It was a collection of states, and it was very nicely organized. I bought it at a show, and I sold it at the last show. I sold that collection of celluloid buttons. That one I happen to have had on my desk. It shows a Buster Brown shoe ad on that one. Okay, now, and of course, I did mention the hobo nickels. There's a hobo nickel, I think, that's going around as well. And the hobo nickel, certainly a child of the Depression. Because as you know, I'm not that deep into it, but I do know that this hobo that eventually got the name of Bo, traveling the country. If you look at that book I sent around, you'll see the one picture which showed all the hobos. They got off the train. The train yard detectives would get all these people off. Well, this guy, how many men, because men were mostly the workforce, how many men were unemployed? What part of the workforce was employed during the Great Depression? 1 out of 3. 35% unemployment. And so as a consequence, men traveled to find work. And this guy, of course, traveling around had the skill with a little tool or a knife, and he could take a nickel and carve an interesting image on it. Maybe a guy with a bowler hat or something, and could get a cup of coffee or get a sandwich or something for that. And of course, the original hobo nickels now, you probably know, they're quite expensive. Quite expensive. And there are new. The artist that did this one is one of the well-known modern artists called Frank Brazell. Frank Brazell is probably one of the best known of the current artists that people buy the hobo nickel. And even then, the nickels today are even 10, 15, 20 bucks. But the real good hobo nickels now are probably up into 3 figures for a real original Bo hobo nickel. And of course, they were a collectible of the 1930s. Well, I suppose I'm at the point where I'm saying that I would open to questions, and this is, I'm not saying this is comprehensive. I'm not saying that there aren't other collectibles out there. I've interviewed people, to see what they were into when they were children, and I got ideas, a few ideas here and there. And I'm sure as I move along in my own interest in buying and selling, I'm likely to stumble on something else and say, oh my gosh, I could add that to the list as well. But hope no one fell asleep. Thank you.
I got a question about, you mentioned with the stamps how they kind of peaked in the 30s.
Yeah, they did.
What
With
about
a high- with a kind of a, that's where they were climbing.
What about other things you may have collected that were free or cheap that you saw peak and then fall during the period of your
Well,
collection?
if you had, it went up and fell. Probably things that were free when the money began, because remember now, during World War II, our economy vastly improved. In fact, we had so many men in the service, we had to start putting women to work. My mother went to work during World War II. And therefore, things other, the decline, other than stamps, the decline in a major area. Well, you know, cigar bans aren't major. No one deals with that today. There are a few people still dealing with matchbooks, selectively speaking. I can't think of anything else that is a real postcard. Now, what has escalated? Postcard. They've escalated. I mean, you go on and you're paying some big money for some good postcards. I sold to a collector. I bought a massive real photo. Remember Shirley Port Huron had those binders? I mean, I had binders. Hundreds of real photo Michigan postcards. And they were pricey. I paid some good money, but I also turned it pretty well because the postcards have escalated. In fact, I just looked. I advertise in the paper, and I just went to look at a collection. I believe it was Wednesday, and the man showed me a variety of things, and he had postcards. But his postcards, I said, no. Joe's Motel in a picture of somebody feeding an elephant at the zoo. You know, not really very interesting. The real photos. So postcards now they haven't done this. Stamps, of course, have done that.
Is there a way to like store them other than just the plastic?
You can buy, for better postcards, you can buy a stiff plastic. You know, you can't, if you twist it, you break it, for high-end postcards. But most postcard collections will be the way that I showed you, most like that. Now, if you have some very pricey postcards, I would say more than 50% of the postcards that I sold to this man who bought them, I mean like now, were in these stiff, hard plastic, you know, holders. So for protecting good postcards, you do that. It's the same thing as right now, there's a big thing if you're into firearms and you're collecting ammunition. There are now stiff plastic boxes to put the ammunition boxes in, because now vintage ammunition boxes are getting very... Why? What did you do with the box when you shot up the shells? Out it went. Some of these, there were very few. And I went to a collector, visiting a collector. I responded to an ad, and he didn't want to sell, but he wanted my thoughts. I bought other things from him, and he had these hard acrylic plastic boxes that he now mounted his rare shot shell boxes in. You know, and there are probably other things that were collected during this period that may have advanced. But a lot of these things were so inexpensive that took the interest of someone who had nothing, and when they started to find something in their pocket, they started to buy. And where did this go? 90%, 95%, where did this go? End of the curb. Goodbye. So some of these things are probably rarer than what people can appreciate. I have bought that little cigar band book. It's, you know, it looks like it's a nothing, but I've only bought another one like it, and it was in one of those little school tablets that you have, old school tablet, and somebody glued that in as well. And I had it. I had a postage stamp collection. I sold it. Where somebody, a child, Hamtramck, put all their postage from during the war and in the 30s, communicate with their family. But somebody tugged at my heartstrings and it went bye-bye, and there it went.
Question
So-
for you. What would you tell a youngster today as far as do you think we have any cheap or free still out there? I'm thinking coins. And I can think of a few, but I appreciate your thoughts on the matter too.
That's an interesting question. What is out there today that would be cheap or free that people would collect? You have to understand something today too. I have introduced my grandchildren to the area of collectibles. But where are most kids today?
True enough.
So do the kids today, like the kids of my era, who looked at these things and set them aside? Well, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's some old disc somewhere that.
No, you're right. Some of them do. I thought that's where we were going. I know some
True.
kids or younger adults collect now what would be called vintage video gaming equipment and stuff like that.
Exactly.
And I know that's collected.
Right.
Record player,
Right.
yeah, they
When
start-
economic times become difficult, people, I think I can share this with you. I've thought about this a lot, and I've discussed it with others. I think that collecting is a gene you have. I'm serious.
Yes, you're
There's something in your mind that draws you to organize, to restore, to appreciate, to collect, to learn. And a lot of others. In fact, I had a question asked of me when I was interviewing some of these seniors. And they said, collect.
Why?
What are you collecting? It's totally off the screen. But others, just like everyone in this room, there's something special about it that intrigues you to organize, to learn, to read, and to appreciate. And again, you heard this, not just from me, but many times. We are only the keepers of these.
Yep.
They're gonna, everything I have is going to go somewhere else.
Which is
We're
good.
only to keep it, but we keep it as best as we can. We keep it from getting damaged. We try to preserve it as well as we can, and we appreciate it. I know I get buried in some of the stuff I have. I just love to pull it out and look at it, think about it, organize it, try to learn more about it. And of course, I learned a long time ago. I learned this from Earl Schill. Because when Earl retired in '87, of course, I went to his home on a regular basis to sit with him in his kitchen. Kathy was, his wife was Irish, very Irish, and we had scones and tea. And we talked about a lot of things, and I learned a lot from Earl Schill. And I've tried to pass that on to my son, one son interested, and my grandchildren, because Earl said this, because Earl did the following. Not only was he big into coins and stamps, but he was also very big into Indian relics. Not just arrowheads, pottery and jewelry, but authentic. And some of you may remember Michigan State and A&A had a legal counsel. His name was George Hattie. Anyone remember George Hattie?
George was from around here.
Right. Well, I knew George Hattie. In fact, my wife and I visited George at his home. And George, we went to his home in Grosse Pointe. And George's home was littered with, he was into coins, but littered with Indian collectibles. So having a long talk with Earl one day, Earl now is 90, and I'm visiting with him a couple times a month for years. And because I would take a break from where I was working and shoot over to visit with Earl, shoot the breeze, and learned a lot. But he would say to me, you know, anybody that collects coins, that walks up to you and they will buy a coin, they like something else as well. He said that. And from that, I began to, myself personally, learn about a lot of other collectibles. Military, pocket knives, marbles, watches, postcards. I couldn't get enough. Couldn't get enough to pick up something. And this is years and years, not just like yesterday. Years and years and years ago. So I always, although coins like you here, coins were my love. My second love. Boy, oh boy, I'd catch that one.
Ron thought in my life we'd say same thing.
But
I'm
nonetheless,
serious.
and they remain that today. And
I was thinking in
they
terms of
remain that today.
asking about modern collectibles, how to change and stuff. I've talked with young people. It seems to me that quarters is the pull it out of change. You can still get a quarter from 1965. It's going to be beat up.
Yes, you can.
But then the other two, and you have to do a little more looking. $half dollars, usually have to go to the bank if you want a whole
You
bunch.
can do that too.
But dollar coins. I live in Royal Oak. There's a Oakland Community College in Royal Oak, and at their machine cuisine place, their cantina, they have a machine that you put in a $20 bill, you get $21 coins out, and you can use in the machines. It's a great way to, and it's. Does it cost something? Yeah, it costs you $20 to get 20 of these coins. Or,
But you can search through and
but
find
it's
something.
still, at least in my mind, I guess that's still in the cheap and free zone.
Yeah.
Have you told anybody the same, or am I missing anything like that?
No, I mean, of course, the coin community and the government have more recently popularized all these commemoratives.
No, yeah.
We've been looking at, we have two categories now, right? We have the classic commems and the modern commems.
Yeah.
And of course, this gets people thinking about coins. I get, anyone who deals gets lots of questions. State quarters, somebody called me up and they had 40 rolls. I said, take them to the bank. I mean, unless you want to search through all of them, I said,
For them.
and find one that you think looks peculiar. Well, what do you mean peculiar? Well, maybe it's not struck evenly, or, other than that.
No.
So it has popularized, and this is where coins are. Coins, of course, are, you probably know this also. Do you know where coins are as far as where people are investing? Number two.
What's number one?
Number two. Number one, fine art.
Okay, yeah.
Big time, people with deep pockets.
Yeah, people
Big,
spend $1 million.
Coins have now passed jewelry. Number two. So coins probably have not yet seen their zenith, as they say. And
Hey,
but
Ron, sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead, no.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I was wondering about menus. Have you run across menus as a collectible?
Interesting. There is a sort of a current down here. Let's call it this because I do deal in it to some extent. Buy and sell. I call it vintage paper. When I get a call from anybody, I tell them if you have any vintage paper. Now, menus, that will depend where it's from,
Right.
of course. If it's from Joe's Diner around the corner, but if it's from the Stork Club and somebody happened to have dated it, well, there you go. But something else though, calendars. Calendars. I do buy and sell calendars. The older the calendar, the more complete the calendar, and like the current interest in collecting checks today. People buy checks today because, among other things, they like the vignette. The steamboat, the Indian, the train, they like all that sort of thing. Well, calendars had that too, because today's calendar is not very interesting, but the older complete though. Complete older calendar, like I bought one, it was hunting,
Oh.
complete. And there'd be something there, this is not the 1940s. They were bear hunting, they were grouse hunting, they were rabbit hunting. That kind of thing goes well, especially if you you put it out at a coin show. You're going to find out that a guy walking along, he likes your coins, but boy, his next best love is he likes to hunt deer. He spots that cow, whoa, it's gone. And another area that wasn't a collectible then, but is a collectible now, along the same lines would be, because they've stopped it. 1994 was the last. And that is the back tags you got when you hunted. If anyone here is a hunter, hunted rabbits, hunted deer, hunted whatever, you had to you purchase your license, and you had to wear on your back a tag. Well, those are very collectible today. So if you go to an estate sale, Joe is well aware of that this is part of vintage paper. But even more interesting than that, prior to those back tags, you had a cap badge that you bought. This was a badge the size of a silver dollar on the back of the pinned onto your cap when you hunted. This is 1928, 29, 30, and 31. Only 4 years. And most of those got thrown. Those are rare. Those are now approaching $100 plus, because it depends. They're celluloid. How cracked are they? And interestingly enough, on the back of that badge, a little metal pocket where the license that you bought, you had to fold it up about the size of a postage stamp and tuck it in that pocket. Well, now, when you buy that badge, you look to see, is that paper there? Oftentimes not. And when it is, often, it's so shabby because you wore your cap when it was snowing, raining, and the paper is shot. And these badges, of course, now have, at an estate sale last fall, at a farmhouse out where I live. There they were, all 4 years, in just about mint.
Wow.
You know what I mean? What would you like to have for those? And of course, I bought them, of course. So there's lots of interesting things out there to collect, but you make an interesting point, and I would add a footnote, and I'm taking too much time probably already, but vintage paper out of World War II, and ink blotters. Now see, probably only a few of you, probably almost none of you. I went through my school years in grade school and the parochial school, God bless them. The nuns loved them. Where we had real ink pens. And those are collectible today. Not the ones with the cartridge, the ones with a little plunger on the side that squeeze the bulb. Those are collectible. And the nibs. Read the nibs. Read the nib. Go to a estate sale, take your glass. Because many of the nibs on the higher end pens are 14 karat gold. And they're all smeared with ink, and somebody's got it out there for $1. Okay? But blotters, especially if they are not used. They got thrown in a drawer somewhere. So blotters, I have quite a name, and people buy the blotters. So blotters, vintage World War II paper, like ration books, things like that are very collectible items as vintage paper. At their time, they were like, when it was over, threw it away. But here and there in a drawer or in the shelf in the basement, you come up with stuff like that. Just neat stuff. And there are a lot of other people like us that appreciate that stuff. They like it. They like to collect it, organize it, just like it. Just hard to explain, but just like it. You know?
There's a.
Well, anyway, it was nice to be with you today. I've taken a lot of time, and I'm sure Lester has other business he wants to.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something there too. At our show, you made a great point, Mark, as far as what people were asking for, that we give away, for example, we give away a lot of the auction catalogs that either U.S. auction catalogs or world coin auction catalogs that we've accumulated or someone has accumulated, donated it to us. We put them out for the people to pick up. Now, if you go to the internet, you're starting to see auction catalogs for sale. And some of these are going, $100, $200, $300 plus, okay? If someone wants a certain kind of an auction catalog because they want a pedigree, they have that particular coinage they picked up, if they're missing that catalog, God knows, the price just escalates up. There's bidding on those catalogs. And that's for free, basically put
Just
them
give it
out.
out.
Right. So that's another great collectible for kids or people that want to, don't have the money to spend, but they want to pick up a catalog and hold on to it, who knows? So,
At a coin show, a dealer that has a brick and mortar store came up to my table and said to me, Ron, you have a lot of stuff here. He said, are you interested in any coin books? I said, well, he said, I got a box of red books and other books. He said, I'm just going to throw them out. I said, well, okay, I'll come and take them. Well, I went and I got the box. What was in the box? The first auction catalog printed in the 1860s with photos of the coins. I kept that. I kept that catalog. Yeah, I'm going to throw it out. Come get the box. I'm going to throw it out. Well, anyway, again, I appreciate your attention.
Ron,
Better.
amazing.
great job.
If you care to look at the ball,
No.
Please,
No,
please
do
take
not.
please.
I would leave it there. Let people go to the table.
this has a very interesting story as well if you're into sports.
Right.
Because of course, as I say, I went to Earl Schill's home, and one day while sitting there with his wife, just talking about things, Earl was a baseball fan, and Kathy just brought it up. She said, "Ron, have you ever seen Earl's ball?" And I said, No. I knew he was a baseball fan because he would close his store on opening day to go to the baseball game. Okay, well anyway, I said, "No, I haven't." She said, "Well, Bernie, our bookkeeper, has the ball. He's showing it around to offer it for sale." And, I mean, I like baseball, I like it, but not that deep thinking about the ball. She said, "Oh yeah," she said, "there's some good signatures on the ball." Well, maybe in about a couple, 3 weeks later, I went and visited. I said, "Gee, Kathy, I'd like to see that ball." She said, "Oh no," she said, "Bernie still has it." I said, "You know, Kathy, I think I tapped Bernie on the shoulder. He's had that ball for a couple of months now, right? Oh, longer." I said, "You don't want to let that ball get lost somewhere." So sure enough, the next time I visited, she said, "Here, Ron, look at this ball." And looked at the ball. I said, "Earl, what do you want?" "Oh, Ron, you don't want this ball. You're doing coins." I said, "Earl, just tell me, what do you want for your ball?" Well, here it is. Yeah, no, it's
Can I get
it's
up close?
very nice.
Don't send it.
Very nice signatures
Yeah.
with Babe Ruth,
And Lou Gehrig on the same ball.
Babe Ruth, and Lou Gehrig.
Wow.
Yeah, and others. I also have with this
Can I
ball.
get an up close
we,
photo of that?
we were in the.
I'd love to get a photo of that. Thank
We
you.
were in the. At that time, Earl was still active, and we were in the. At that time, he had 6 different offices in Detroit. We were in the 17th floor of the Citibank building, and we went downstairs to the bank where he had his accounts, and he looked up I was going to ask him, "Earl, would you give me a receipt?" He said, "I'll do better." Called up, "We're going to go downstairs to the bank. I'm going to get you a notarized letter." And in the notarized letter, it identifies the people and the date and so on. And so I have a notarized letter with it to add to the ball, which adds, I think, to the ball a lot more. And I have a postcard at home too of the Fort Shelby Hotel where he was the night manager.
Wow.
But,
Great.
okay.
All right, let's take a 5-minute
Again, thank you
break.
for your attention. I'm just going to.
Thank you.
Thank you for this talk. This was a
Yeah, this is
excellent
great.
talk. Really, would you here? Would you be willing to give this to the